What we're now going to be looking at is the question of how rabbis make decisions about cases that are not mentioned in the Torah. If you have a new question that's asked and it isn't directly dealt with in the Torah, very often, especially in medical ethics, we're going to find rabbis say this or rabbis say that. What we're going to look at is how they actually get to those conclusions. There's going to need to be some basic vocab we get familiar with. One of the words we need to know is Sha'alah. Sha'alah, I'm sure you will know from Hebrew, means a question. Teshuvah, you might be familiar with the word as repentance, but it actually means a reply or a response. A posek is the word used for a senior rabbi, not just a regular rabbi, but the sort of rabbi who's really capable of making these decisions. How are they going to do this? Well, we're going to look at one example. One of the most famous poskim, i.e. he was a posek, was Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, who lived and worked and did what he did primarily in New York in the 1950s, 60s, 70s, and a little bit of the 80s. We're going to look now at a question he was asked, and we're going to see how he went through the process of answering it. So here's the question. I've changed the words a little bit to make it a bit more user-friendly and a bit more anonymous. But basically, you've got a person in a psychiatric hospital. Rosh Hashanah's coming up. He wants to know whether he should leave the hospital at risk to his own health in order to do the mitzvah of hearing the shofar on Rosh Hashanah. Now, just a bit of a background, we think of going to shul on Rosh Hashanah as being the main mitzvah, but really it isn't. The thing one must do on Rosh Hashanah, apart from obviously introspection and self-improvement, is listening to the shofar being blown. Prayers can be said at home or even in a hospital room. So his question is, should he leave the hospital to go and hear the shofar being blown? Now, Rabbi Moshe Feinstein can't just give an answer from what seems like common sense. We may say a mitzvah is a mitzvah, leave hospital, go do the mitzvah, or one might just come up to the conclusion that your health is more important, just look after that. But Rabbi Feinstein, like every posek, is going to go through a careful process. He's going to be looking at the written Torah. You can see a little bit of it over here. He's going to be looking at the oral Torah, primarily in the form of the Talmud, the Gemara, and also a few of the rabbis who followed the Gemara, meaning who came after the Gemara. You have the Rishonim, which means early rabbis, there in the years 800 to around 1500. You have the Acharonim, who are the later rabbis, who are from around 1500 to the present day. So let's see how Rabbi Moshe Feinstein answers this. So first of all, we've got a verse in the Torah here, a pasuk, clearly telling us that Rosh Hashanah is a day when one must blow the shofar. It doesn't say blow the shofar if you feel like it, blow the shofar if you're well enough, blow the shofar if it's not too inconvenient. It says that every Jew needs to hear the shofar being blown, and that's the way we've always understood it. However, if we look in the Talmud Bavli, this is the Gemara, we find an interesting case. We're talking about giving charity now, just like blowing the shofar. Giving charity is a commandment, it's something we have to do. However, Rabbi Eliyahu said that one who wants to give charity or is fulfilling the mitzvah of giving charity may not give so much that he himself ends up in a state of need. He may not give away so much of his money, the number given is 20%, a fifth, that he ends up needing money from other people, needing help from other people. If he does so, he's in a negative situation, and we have to avoid such a thing. Now, what does giving charity have to do with blowing the shofar? Not much that we can see right now. Rabbeinu Asher here is talking about spending money to do a mitzvah. We're going to use the example of tefillin, which I think is what he was talking about. Tefillin are expensive, you all know that. So how much of a person's money do they need to spend to give tefillin, to buy a pair of tefillin? If they're going to starve as a result of doing it, should they still do it? So Rabbeinu Asher, who lived in 13th to 14th century Germany and partly Spain for some of his life, says a person is not obligated to give large sums in order to fulfill one single commandment, because we see from the fact that with charity you are limited to 20% because you have to protect your own well-being. He extrapolates that principle about charity must apply to all other mitzvot. All other commandments must also have that price cap of 20%. And therefore, Rabbi Moshe Feinstein in 20th century America says that if it's true that you don't need to give more than 20% of your money to charity, and therefore it's true that you must not give more than 20% of your money to fulfill one mitzvah, then you must also not give 20% of your money for this mitzvah, the mitzvah of hearing the shofar. And if that's the case, then we can very easily deduce that your health, especially your mental health, is probably worth a lot more to you than 20% of your money. So if 20% of your money is more than you're expected to give, it stands to reason that risking your health is not something you're expected to do in order to fulfill one mitzvah, assuming, of course, it's a reasonable risk. If you want to see more of Rabbi Feinstein's answers, you'll find them in this book. This book's called Igrat Moshe, which means the letters of Moshe. And he was written hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of letters through his career, and he responded to them. And you'll see there's always a general pattern that's looking back to the verses in the Torah, looking at the Talmud, looking at earlier rabbis, looking at later rabbis, and trying to find a principle. You won't always find the answer to your question simply, but a rabbi who's really experienced, or any other learned individual who really knows all of the different sources, will be able to say a certain principle is spoken about in the Torah, in the Talmud, in the Rishonim, the early rabbis, in the Achronim, the late rabbis, and although it doesn't relate directly on the surface in an obvious way to this case, maybe if we look at the deeper principle and what's really going on behind the scenes, we'll be able to apply it. So that's the process of Sha'ala and Teshuvah that you need to be very familiar with in order to be successful in this unit.